See, with true Christians, you literally step outside or aside of yourself, right? Your inner man. And that's where Christ dwells, right? So you're no longer fully powering your own ship of your mind, your heart, your body, your soul, as you being lead captain of your inner man. That's the whole point of becoming a Christian, is that you basically die to your ego, you die to your own self and your own mind, your own thoughts, your own actions, your own feelings, and you step aside from that and you let God take center stage. You let him take the spotlight inside of you, right? And his son Jesus. And then they kind of steer the ship and they navigate where you're going. And it's almost like I don't think anyone's having this perfect, amazing, awesome life, and then all of a sudden they wake up one day and go, oh, I think I'm going to go to God today. Most times it's either someone has been like born, bred, raised into Christianity. And I'm not going to say you're not a true Christian if that's the case, but potentially you haven't been through anything that's actually taught you the power of the Holy Spirit. It's just been learned, right? More or less. But I think a lot of people, especially in the last, like in this day and age, in these last 10 years or so, well, especially since Y2K happened, have found themselves like at rock bottom in various ways, whether that be some form of mental illness or hardship, like a divorce or a loss of home or something, or a loved one, grief, things like that, something that, or even addiction, something that takes you to the bottom, right? And when there's nothing else there, God will come to you and be like, I'm here. Now, you don't have to accept him, of course, but I'm talking about those that have. When you do make that decision, you're like, yes, I will accept this. I will accept you, Lord, which is really a gift. He then comes into like a covenant and agreement with you, and the agreement looks like him basically, it's like a contract in a way, him saying, okay, I will take over your ship and steer you because you've been steering the wrong way. You've been steering your own ship into a storm or into an iceberg. But I will come and take over the ship and I will navigate it now, and we're going to do things my way. We're going to go my direction, do things my way. But it's not in a domineering dictator way. It's the way that he's always intended it for you, because God wants us all to be on a straight and narrow path, right? Everybody. But people, of course, have free will. So, and Satan likes to come in and make house too in you, in your heart, mind, body, and soul. And he likes to steer you off course. And then once you're heading for that storm or that iceberg, he's like, well, here we're on our way to a wreckage, or he sometimes just bails or whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is he steered you off course and got you into calamity. And that was his goal from the first minute. And once that's been achieved in his mind, he's done all, mission accomplished, right? But Christ will come along and say, no, you're not done for. It's not the end. Yes, you're into a storm now, or you've hit this iceberg or whatnot, but I will take over and I will recourse you to where you were originally once were, or where I originally intended you to go. But it's not free and clear. You have to also make the agreement that you will step aside and allow him to take over. So picture yourself being the pilot of your plane, or the navigator of your ship, or whatever reference you want to use. Who knows? Could be weeks, months, years. You've went completely off course. It's now hit that storm or that iceberg. There's no turning back. The ship's about to be a complete wreckage. You can continue to deny Christ and go right into the eye of that storm, and who knows what happens, right? But the outcome's definitely not good. Or you can take his gift, his offering, and say, okay, yes, I do want to get out of this storm. I do want to get back on safe ground, safe travel. And he will do that for you. However, in the agreement, the covenant means that you will step aside from the wheel, so to speak, and say, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I piloted once, all right, who knows? But at this point right now, for this last while, obviously I'm not I'm not in the position to do this any longer. And you turn over that will. It's not all, well, it's basically your free will, yeah. Because prior to that, your free will was with Satan, whether you realized it or not. But now you're turning over that free will to Christ, and then he will take over, but it's not just scot-free. You, in turn, would have to take your hands off that wheel, so to speak, step back and let somebody else navigate. And yeah, it can feel foreign at first because you up until then were the pilot or the captain, right? And now all of a sudden you're letting somebody else captain, pilot, and navigate your vessel. Like it, it's like, wow, to put that much trust, right? But you got to remember what you were doing wasn't working. So, just like in human life, when we're doing a job, so to speak, and we're failing at it, we have an option to keep failing or to allow someone else to try their hand at it, right? And that does take a lot of trust and a humbling to make that decision, right? Because you can very easily say, nah, I'm good, I got this, and then you're going to watch everything fall into more destruction. So there's a crossroads that everybody comes to, right? But yeah, so when you do make the choice to partner with Christ, he will take over your vessel now moving forward and get you. It's going to take time. If you're heading towards a storm or an iceberg, just say on a ship, for instance, you're not going to turn that ship around in 10 minutes. It's going to take some time to recourse, re-navigate, right? It's the same idea with Christianity, spiritualness, whatever, your spiritual path. It's going to take time for God to realign you, and it could take days, weeks, months, years even. It depends on how off course you were, right? And everybody's different. But eventually, in time, if you're patient and can wait, you'll start to see things turn around, and then your trust grows, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, you do know what you're doing. But in turn, you have to allow him to take over, no matter how long it may take. And yeah, there's going to come times where you're like, you know what, I don't know if we're sailing fast enough. This seems like we're not getting there quick enough. Let me try again. And God will let you. He'll be like, okay, sure, have your hand out again. And then you'll see over days, weeks, months, you start to go off course again. And you're like, oh, okay, never mind. I guess I'm still not as good as you at being the captain. And you're not, right? So yeah, so there's just that whole part of it is that true Christians will step aside. Those that have made the decision to allow the Lord in and to navigate their ship, so to speak, and to be the pilot and captain of their vessel, they are separated from those that haven't. And there's a clear distinction because those that haven't are still navigating their own vessel, and themselves and Christians can see them going off course. And so there can be a bit of a judgment there because the Christian is like, well, I was in that position once and I humbled myself and allowed Christ to take over. And yeah, it took some time and it was kind of hard to give up that control, but I did it. And now I've been seeing myself sailing onto better waters. So there's a bit of a judgment because the Christian to the non-believer is like, it's very simple. It's very straightforward. Just step aside outside yourself and make the decision I made and let Christ take over your vessel like I did and like he did with me. And you will see things turn around for you like I did. But there's also understanding at the same time. That's how Christians can relate and understand, is because they themselves were in that same position, in that same boat, no pun intended, but yeah, that same position, that same boat. And they know what it required and where they were at. So it's like this contrast, because on one hand, a Christian, like a believer, can relate with a non-believer because they're like, hey, I've been there, I get it. Like, you're preaching to the choir. I know how you feel. The frustration, the despair, the stress, etc., etc. But on the other hand, they had the same crossroads that the non-believer has, where they could choose to continue going off course or let Christ navigate. And yeah, maybe they didn't want to let Christ navigate per se, but they still made that choice nonetheless to step aside and let somebody else pilot, captain their vessel. And now they see such a change, right? Because some time has went by and they see that it's smoother sailing now moving forward. So they just want the same for you, right? They're like, I know it's hard, I know it is, but you can do it. It's very simple. Just step aside, make the choice, put your ego down, say goodbye to Satan and your own free will, and just let Christ do it. And yes, it does mean giving up so-called things that you were used to doing, but chances are those so-called things weren't positive, healthy choices in the first place. Like, it's like somebody wanting to continue drinking poison, even though they know that it's slowly killing them. Like, why would you want to do that, right? And if someone asked you, would you do that in like in real life, you would be like, no, I don't want to do that. But that's what you're doing internally without realizing it, because you may just not know, but most of the time it's Satan, and he's taken hold, and you just don't know, because he likes to be sneaky about things, whereas Christ is not like that. He's a strong captain. He's a strong pilot. He knows what he's doing. He's sailed these vessels before. He's flown these vessels before. He's done this. He knows what he's doing. He's the best navigational captain you could ask for. But yes, it requires trust, not because you don't trust Christ necessarily, but because you're so used to doing it yourself. It'd be like if you're a captain of your own ship in the real world for 30 years, and suddenly you're letting someone new take over your whole ship and vessel and have your life in their hands, right? It would require a lot of trust, but that stuff happens every day. We trust pilots to fly us in airplanes. We trust captains to sail ships, train conductors to conduct trains. And, we trust humans to do this stuff every day with our lives, and even our children's and families' lives. So why can't you trust Christ to navigate your internal, your mind, body, heart, and soul? You can. But again, it just requires that humbling of the ego in order to have that occur in the first place. But you also come into a covenant, an agreement with Christ, like a contract, so to speak, that you now will sit down and let him navigate and at least get you back on course. And yes, you can take over at any time, but you're going to start to see yourself slowly veer off course again. And when you become familiar with smooth waters compared to choppy waters, which would you rather? Right? So of course you become accustomed to the smooth waters, the smooth sailing. You don't want those choppy waters again. Why? It's not needed, right? Let's continue smooth sailing. So that's kind of like the difference there. But Christians know, true believers that have accepted Christ inside, that's what it means, is that it's basically allowing him to navigate you internally from here on forward, and coming into an agreement and a partnership with him, and not saying, hey, I got all this on my own, and canceling your agreement with Satan, right? And so that's what happens when a Christian or believer allows Christ in generic. I'm trying to make it make sense. But that's the difference between Christ navigating your vessel, you navigating your vessel, and Satan navigating your vessel. So hope this can help someone.